It's all for you. Yeah, yo. There whenever it matters, and even more when you feel like it doesn't. Protect you so you never feel like you wasn't. Know I'm right alongside you. Either that or I'm behind you, but always got you. End of discussion, nothing means more. First one to offer is shoulders for what you reach for. Thought I saw the eyes of the world until I seen yours. And know that I ain't see a better view yet. I'm with whatever, so don't ever you fret. Know that you covered, not a hurdle or a heartbreak. A change will partake, cause none of them won't ever get comfortable in your walkway. My job is to aware you, fully loaded, prepare you for all of the above that I'm never letting get near you. But still in all, give you every advantage I found. Couldn't find a better fit for them, along with my crown. And since the baton was passed, I've been down. Cause failing's not an option, and dad is not a noun, not at all.
What's going on? Wait, 1, 2, 3. All right. What's going on, everybody? My name is Ishmael Street from Dad Is Not a Noun. What's going on? I have a special guest. You've seen this brother on CNN, MSNBC. I think I might saw him on Fox, maybe, or I don't know. But also, I call him the returning champion on the Rolando Martin show. I have the honor and the privilege to have this brother on. Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali. How you doing, sir?
Oh, I'm blessed, brother. Thank you so much for having me and for everything you do.
Thank you. How you like that introduction?
That was kind of lit right there. I appreciate it. You know what I'm saying? I was like, well, let me wait and see who this cat is. So no, I appreciate that.
But before I'll give you the mic to let people know about you a little bit. How's your niece? Because I know on your IG she got the COVID. How's she doing?
Yeah, no, she's much better. Both she and her brother, who's a couple years older, actually got it. So, it's a trip. A lot of times folks think that kids can't get it. And, unfortunately, that's not true. They get the virus, less, than some of the adults do. But we gotta protect our kids. You know what I'm saying? Our nieces, our nephews, and everyone else, and make sure that they're straight, and that they also understand how to protect themselves. So I appreciate all the prayers. I can't tell you, it was crazy. There were so many folks who reached out with kind and positive words. So, much love to everybody, and to their families as well.
Definitely, man. And then break down your resume for people before we get into this conversation about systematic racism. So break it down, King.
I've just been really, really blessed. I've been doing social justice issues since I was 16. I grew up in two totally different worlds. I grew up in Appalachia, and then I grew up in Michigan and in Detroit. So, that's different. When you're rocking in the hills of West Virginia, it's so much different than when you're on the streets in Detroit. And just blessed. I was raised and mentored by civil rights leaders, other social justice leaders, the early leaders in the environmental justice movement. And then, went to school, and then was blessed that as a student, I actually helped found the Office of Environmental Justice at EPA. I spent 22 years there, 2 years on Capitol Hill, working for John Conyers, who used to be the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. Once again, shout out to the D. And just been blessed that communities have put their trust in me. And I've always worked diligently to honor that and to try to make transformative change happen, both on the economic side, on the environmental side, the public health side, housing, a number of other issues that I've worked on, gun violence, and a few other things. It's a holistic way. It's a holistic set of issues that are happening in our communities, and we need a holistic set of solutions. So I'm just very thankful to be able to give back to my community.
That's awesome. And then also, you talked about working in the EPA. Can you kind of talk to me about being a Black man working in EPA? Because I know the EPA was created by Richard Nixon. Mm-hmm. So you don't see a lot of people of color in that world. So can you kind of talk about that?
Yeah. So, again, I came in as a student, as an intern, and over the years just worked my way up. And you hit it on the head. There were very few men of color or women of color in leadership positions inside of the Environmental Protection Agency and in a number of other agencies and departments that eventually I helped lead through some of the working groups that I was a part of. And representation matters. If you don't see yourself, then in many instances, you never dream that you can reach certain levels because you just haven't seen others to be able to do that. Then that doesn't stop folks, because there always has to be the first.
Yes.
But that shouldn't be the case. Not at the end of the 20th century or the beginning of the 21st century, where we still didn't have, leadership. We're blessed now that we're about to have the first African-American man,
Yes.
Michael Regan, to actually be EPA administrator. So, everybody up there on Capitol Hill, get it together, get it right, get that confirmation done. Because if you don't, we will come for you. And let me clarify that, because I don't want nobody saying,
yes. How people, they're going to take bite bits of this conversation and run with it.
Yeah, so we will come for you with our votes. We will come for you with our education. We will come for you by making sure that we are leveraging the power that we all have, whether through social media or other things. So I'm confident that folks will do the right thing. But sometimes you got to check folks and let them know that if you are not willing to do the right thing, then we will get more deeply engaged in the process and push you in that direction. So, we always rely on people's better angels, if I can say it that way. Yes. But sometimes that is not enough. So I'm confident that it will get done.
And then also, I do believe in diversity, but I'm more inclined of inclusion. Because like you were talking about earlier, having people in power in those positions, plays a big role. So can you kind of talk about that aspect of that inclusion factor instead of the diversity factor?
Yeah, diversity has its place, but lots of times diversity for some folks is about checking boxes. Right. And it is not about building healthy systems and unpacking and dismantling systemic racism and all the things that are a part of that. And we have to make sure that people understand that we're not interested in tokenism. We are not interested in window dressing. We want to see significant numbers of people who are also connected to our communities, because we know Black and brown does not necessarily mean that you are down for what's happening in our communities. Public Enemy once said, every brother ain't a brother. So when you unpack that, then you understand that everybody who looks like us is not necessarily down with the transformative change that many of us are pushing for. And that's why, people need to understand it is much deeper than just diversity. It is about creating new systems. It is about creating healthy workplaces. It is about making sure that when we have brothers and sisters inside of these positions, that they have the power and resources that is necessary to make real change happen. And that is what a 21st century paradigm looks like. That's what 21st century organizations must look like. Too many people are operating from 20th century paradigms. We don't have no time for that. And there are so many folks who are working diligently to make sure that we're creating real systems that benefit our people.
Definitely. And then also what kind of confuses me too is like, how has that word progressive been hijacked? Mm-hmm. Because if you think of the word and you think about the historic of progression, it's enriched when it comes to the civil rights movement, the women's suffrage, unions. So can you kind of break that down, how that side was able to change the narrative when it comes to the progressive movement?
Yeah, well, anytime you're trying to have cultural shifts to make real change actually happen, and people see that you're starting to make progress, then they're going to throw a new label on it, especially if you haven't thought through the process of how folks going to come for you, right? So, you mentioned the women's suffrage movement. When folks saw women trying to get out of the house, they were talking about keeping them barefoot and in the kitchen or some kind of crazy stuff like that back in the day. And sisters were like, no, I'm not having it. You know what I'm saying? I am a full person. And I deserve all the rights that are part of being a human being. And the same thing in the civil rights movement. It's amazing how so many folks now will embrace Dr. King, and yes, they should, and many of the other civil rights leaders. But they was calling them radicals and a number of other things when they were pushing for basic amenities, basic human rights. and you step back and you're like, well, how could you possibly create a false narrative about giving people freedom, about giving people the ability to sit at a lunch counter, to be able to take a drink of water out of a fountain, and so many other things. And if you're not careful, people will reframe that. They will repackage that. It's almost like, let me give y'all this quick example. It's almost like the cigarette industry. So they used to spend huge amounts of money trying to convince folks that cigarettes didn't cause cancer. And then they would, over time, start to weaken that a little bit because they knew people were becoming educated and said, well, wait a minute, nah, that ain't true, because I knew, Uncle Ray over there who kept smoking, he got lung cancer, and such got lung cancer, so forth and so on. It's the same thing when we're dealing with civil rights issues, when we're dealing with social justice issues, when we're dealing with racial inequality, that folks will try and change the narrative to just confuse you, because they know if they can create chaos, if they can confuse you, then you will take your foot off the gas. You'll step back because, well, I don't know if I really want to be associated with that because such and such said that ain't a good look. That ain't the move. Yeah. And that's why we have to be educated. We have to have places where we can come and get real information from trusted sources. That's why shows like Roland Martin is so important, Unfiltered. That's why shows like that you're listening and watching today are so important. And that's why we have to make sure that we're also owning our own spaces in the media so that you can get real information and then make decisions for yourself, right? I never tell anybody, which direction they should go, but I do say, make sure that you're getting some information because we are brilliant. If you give us the information and you give us access, we'll do some transformative things. And that is a part of your initial question of, what's going on and how we begin to change that dynamic.
Definitely, because it's interesting that you brought that up, because it goes back to, I know you remember Lee Atwater's and the little secret tape he had of how, they change words like tax cuts and what was the other thing he said? Big government,
Yep.
Just to change the narrative. Like, you can't say the N-word anymore, so we got to say something else to just change the idea. But the philosophy is the same. It's just the wording is different.
Yeah. Well, now they hit you with the word urban, right? And you know what they really want to say. Yeah. But they'll put urban in front of whatever the other word is to tell you that ain't for you, that ain't about you, and you should not be investing in that space. So that's just one example of how they play the game. Now, we have to make sure that we're checking folks. We got to let folks know that when you want to play these games, that we will take our dollars, we will disinvest from whatever it is that you got going on, and that we're just not having it. And again, it comes back to education, but it also, more importantly, and for folks who, people hear me speak and stuff around whether around this country or outside of the country, it is about us realizing that we actually have power, right? So they try to teach us or to strip away our knowledge that of the amazingness that is us, right? And that when we actually get focused, when we actually come together, that we have immense amounts of power. Now, we may only be 14 or 15% of the population, but people follow everything that we do. Culture is us, right? The United States wouldn't exist without Black and brown folks. So we have to realize that we have the ability to be transformational. And when we get that straight, we stop lowering our expectations and we stop letting people play games with us, whether on mental manipulation or getting into our pockets and actually disinvesting and taking wealth away from us. We are wealthier than we could ever imagine. That doesn't mean that we still don't have to focus on creating additional types of wealth to do good. And that's just the mindset and the paradigms that I operate from.
Definitely. And then when we talk about systematic racism, I want to touch on environment and economic, because they go hand in hand. So can you kind of talk about, them, they're hand in hand in a way. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Well, our folks, first of all, we come from the land. We come from the environment. We traditionally, if you understand our heritage, we have always been connected, through our spiritual practices, through our agricultural practices, just in the way that we interact with Mother Earth. That is African people. That is Latinx people. That is indigenous people. Now, when you flip the paradigm, you also understand that we have been pushed into many communities through redlining and redistricting and through zoning to create sacrifice zones. where people place everything that nobody else wants. So all the toxic pollution is often pumped into our lungs, into our bodies, which cause long-term medical conditions. So y'all ask yourself the question, you know, when's the last time y'all seen a rich community have a coal-fired power plant, an incinerator, a petrochemical, a dump, all these different types of things that cause cancer, that cause asthma, that cause all these different conditions. And that's that environmental aspect and how racism plays out. And now in a COVID-19 moment, you know, if you have one of these long-term medical conditions, it makes you more vulnerable to COVID, both on the infection side, the hospitalization side, and losing your life. Let me just drop some numbers on folks, because I like numbers, you know. So we got 100,000 people who die prematurely each year in our country from air pollution. That's more dying from air pollution than are dying from gun violence. And all of us know someone who's been a victim of gun violence, or we know somebody who knows somebody. We got more people dying from air pollution than are dying from car crashes. Yeah. So, you know, when somebody gets shot, we got something to say about it. Right. But yet African-American and Latinx folks, you know, are the ones who are disproportionately dying. And here's some other stuff, and I'm gonna give something for the brothers and give something for the sisters, right? So air pollution, for you brothers who are watching, lower sperm count. Air pollution also causes low birth weight babies and causes miscarriages and a number of other things that sometimes impact our community. For our seniors who might be watching, air pollution is linked to dementia. And eventually they'll probably also show that there are linkages also to some of the other brain disorders that are going on. So that's just one example of when we allow people to put things in our community, or we don't know about what's going on, then there are these impacts. We got 80 million people in our country who are uninsured and underinsured. Yep. So when you get these medical conditions that are going on, you're in many instances responsible for carrying that medical cost. Yep. Which then again, I believe in talking about the pockets, because, you know, we can talk about some of the other stuff and people get focused when their pockets start feeling a little light. Oh, yeah. So all of this stuff is taking wealth out of our communities. And that's why we got to flip the script on folks. And that's the environmental and the economic side. Here's the other part I want brothers and sisters to pay attention to. How many of y'all, if you're old enough to remember when beepers were around, how many of y'all made some money off of beepers? Go ahead, I'll wait. How many folks made money off of cell phones when cell phones came out, right? So these were big technology sets of opportunities that Black and brown folks didn't make much money off of, but we paid a whole bunch of money in because now everybody got one. Some folks got two or three. So now we got some economic opportunities to get engaged in the new climate economy that's going on. And it's vast. So you have an opportunity to, one, there's nothing wrong with having a job, right? And I'm all for people getting trained in solar and wind and a number of other opportunities. But folks, please hear me. The real opportunity is in you starting your own businesses in this space. You got a new administration that $2 trillion is going to be dedicated to this particular set of work. And this is not the only one. We can go into a bunch of the other sets of opportunities. 40% of those dollars, so we're talking about somewhere around $750 to $800 billion, is supposed to go to vulnerable communities and the work that needs to happen there. Somebody has to do that work. Somebody is going to benefit from it. And if we don't position ourselves, then the environmental injustices that have happened will continue on the economic side.
That's the key question too. How do we get generation or just people of color to stop focusing on building like clothing brand and focus that into that world? Because I think that's important, because I think, like you said, innovation is going to solve climate change. Mm-hmm. And you don't see a lot of people of color, Black people in that world coming together to kind of figure out how can we affect climate change. Mm-hmm. It's just a lot of people focus on, let me create this t-shirt brand. Let me create this a clothing brand. Let me create this app brand or whatever. So how can we get, like, if not this generation, the upcoming generation to focus on climate change? Because I kind of see that movement there, but I don't see like people that look like us in that movement.
Yeah. Well, one, make sure y'all are also checking out the environmental justice movement, because that is led by Black and brown folks, and it has been for 40 years because there wasn't a seat at the table in the broader climate and environmental movement. Secondly, you know, I mean, I don't want to take away from brothers and sisters who are interested in the apparel world, because there are sets of opportunities there, and people have seen others who look like them who've had success. So of course they're going to, you know, navigate in that direction, because, you know, they've seen that it is possible. I will say this, is that also understand the impacts that happen to your environment from traditional practices in that space. You know, it takes a huge amount of money to, money and resources to actually make a t-shirt. Most folks don't know that. I'm talking about the cotton being turned into material, huge amounts of water that's in there. So when y'all think about Flint water crisis and many of these other water crises that are going on, there is a better way to do that. And there are new fibers and sustainable ways that we can actually, if you want to be in that space, that you can do good and do well at the same time. Now, going back to your question around the climate economy, you know, there are different organizations that are out there. Folks can hit me up at MustafaSantiagoAli.com. I can point you in the right direction, but you have some power in this. So one, a number of these federal agencies are going to be putting out huge amounts of contracts, subcontracts, and grants that you should be taking a peek at and seeing if it can be a part of, you know, the way that you want to move forward. The Small Business Administration is going to start building criteria into supporting small businesses in this space to help to get you up and going. And then there are others who are also starting to make some investments in this space, but that's just one part of it. So you mentioned also there is an educational component that's necessary. So one, we should be pushing our school districts to begin as early as, you know, kindergarten or first grade, to begin to have this criteria in the curriculums so that our young people are being exposed to both the impact side, but even more importantly, the opportunities that are out there. And those stories should be, you know, a part of what they're learning. And then we've got all kinds of other opportunities. You know, our historically Black colleges and universities, you know, our training programs that are out there. We've got to get them focused where this new set of energy and new set of resources are. Because one, it helps our communities to be healthier, but two, we can finally begin to build wealth, which is so incredibly important. You know, I'll pull a list together for your listeners of different places that they can, one, get information on like the health side, but also on the economic side.
Definitely, because it's well needed. Because I feel like, going back to what we were saying earlier, is that we can learn from our history. Again, our ancestors, we understood the earth and the way the ground is fertilized, and we lived off the earth. So if we want information, we can look to the past.
Most definitely. And some of that past is positive, and others is filled with challenges. So, you know, we were brought to America because of our expertise in the agricultural world, because that is what, you know, the United States at that time was running off of. And also because they wanted some free labor. Let's not get it twisted. So they could build a country, but that's for another show. So I hope you'll invite me back and we will unpack that for folks.
Definitely.
You know, the other part is, you know, there's some stuff most folks won't know probably much about this, called CCC. You know, these conservation corps that came out of the 30s and 40s, and now they're bringing it back. Now the old version had some real racial justice related issues where brothers who were a part of that were given some of the dirtiest and most dangerous jobs, which is a reoccurring theme throughout America. But, you know, with this new one, you know, there's a new set of opportunities that are there. And we should be positioning ourselves and our communities to be able to take advantage of these job opportunities that will be a part of this CCC process. And it is a piece of the larger climate economy, but it's one of the first ones that they're rolling out. So, you know, it's interesting, brother. we all be on, on IG or a number of other places, and we see folks talking about getting that bag, right? Everybody talking about, I'm about to get the bag. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. So what's your bag really look like? And,
Right.
people be talking about, well, I'm gonna pull down, 5 G's, this month or something like that. And I'm like, how do I get my people to understand that there is such a bigger and broader set of opportunities than the few areas that we find ourselves in? Nothing to, I don't want to take away anything from, how people been, getting down, what your hustle is. But I do want our people to stop thinking about thousands of dollars and even hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. Yeah. We need to be, our mentality needs to now be that we want to play in the $1 billion and $1 trillion arena. And I know that is a leap for some folks, but as a collective, right, as individuals, it might be a bit more difficult. But as collectives, there is no reason that we cannot not fully be able to compete in $1 billion and $1 trillion sets of opportunities. You just have to, 1, educate yourself, 2, understand how the flow is going and for how long is that flow going. And 3, how do we leverage the capital that's necessary to be able to fully engage in this? And imagine if you're in a $1 billion or $1 trillion industry and it don't work out quite that well, that you only make a few $100 million, you're still doing all right.
That's right.
That's got to be our mentality. We have got to stop. It's interesting, and I'll let us transition to the next question. Malcolm X shared with us a long time ago that, lots of times folks are getting the crumbs from the table. Yes. And I appreciate brother Malcolm, but the reality of the situation is that we are no longer just dealing with the crumbs from the table. We are dealing with the dust from the crumbs on the table because of systemic systems that were put in place and because we have not seen ourselves in the greatness that we actually are. And I'll stop right there on that.
No, it's facts, because if you go back to history, like the prior interview I had a couple of months ago with Pamela Gardy, she's the executive director of the July Perry Foundation. Mm-hmm. And last year was the 100-year anniversary of the Ocoee massacre. Mm-hmm. This year is the 100-year anniversary of Tulsa. Mm-hmm. And the one thing I said that when it comes to generational wealth, 100 mm-hmm. years is not a long mm-hmm. time ago. Yeah. If you think about Norman and July Perry, they were the 2 richest Black men in Ocoee. They built Ocoee's wealth. Mm-hmm. And if that never happened, it'd be a different story. Because again, generational wealth, when you're talking about billions and trillions in dollars, they were there, but it was taken away.
Yeah, I mean, that's a reoccurring story throughout our history in this country when Black folks, right? And, I often talk about Black and brown, but we're going to talk about Black folks right now. Right. Anytime that they have been able to build institutions and been able to build significant amounts of wealth, then they were attacked to both dismantle those systems that they were able to build and to extract the wealth from them. It's a new day now, right? Because we now have the ability, if we do it properly, to not necessarily have to worry about the physical attacks, but we do have to worry about the other attacks that come when you become free, when you understand the power that you have, and when you start to empower others. Because in our traditions, it has never been about the individual garnering power. It has always supposed to have been about the community actually building that power, because we knew that if the community built power, it would be much more difficult for someone to be able to take that away. Yeah. Not impossible, of course. So we've got some amazing things that are in front of us, and that's why we have to educate ourselves, right? From our elders to the youngest in our communities about how real change can actually happen.
Definitely. And to tie this conversation towards the end, talk about what's going on in Texas, because that kind of is basically what we're talking about, what the people in Texas are dealing with. So can you touch on that a little bit?
Man, brothers and sisters in Texas, they just keep catching it. You know what I'm saying? Folks is catching it everywhere. Everybody got to remember, they've been hit by hurricane after hurricane. Yeah. Everybody remembers, you know, in Houston when that water just got super high. And they just, I mean, it was just amazing the things that they were dealing with. And even before these storms, both natural and man-made disasters come together, folks in places like Port Arthur, Texas, you know, a thriving middle-class African-American community, had all these facilities come in, stripped culture away, took jobs away from the local folks. And, you know, you got places like the Manchester community in Houston, Texas, hardworking Latinx community. When you go there, you roll down the window of your car, you feel like you're breathing in gasoline fumes. So I just want to give people the context of what the challenges are the folks are dealing with. And now, you know, when we had this snowstorm that came in, and people were like, wait a minute, it's snowing? It's snowing in Houston, it's snowing in San Antonio, it's snowing in Austin, so forth and so on. And I love context. So we're talking about Texas, right? But I want y'all to also remember that at the same time that you had a freak, what they labeled freak snowstorm happening in Texas, and it wasn't freak because climate change is what's driving many of this, same thing was happening in Saudi Arabia. All y'all done seen, you know, Aladdin, and you know, in Saudi Arabia, it is usually 70, 80 degrees on a cold day, 175 degrees, I'm exaggerating, on a hot day. So all that to be said, I want y'all to understand this. So there are all kinds of different dynamics that are happening in Texas that are the same that's happening in your community. There's a set of crumbling infrastructures, and you find that it is worse in communities of color. And they also had some deregulation things where Texas was saying, well, you know what, our power grid, we got this, right? But they never made the investments in their power grid, so it began to fail. And that hit everybody, but we know that our people are hit first and worst. So folks are saying, well, Mustafa, what does that look like when you say we're hit first and worst? So you got folks, because of long-term exposures, who have these medical conditions, who were no longer able to use the dialysis machines that they had in their house to clean their blood. So they slowly began inching closer to death because there was no power for them. You had folks who were on breathing machines and had to go to their cars and hope that the adapters would work in their lighter so that they could get their oxygen machines to work, so they could literally take a breath of air. You had folks, because you had at one time, I think it was close to 7 million people who didn't have water, who began to actually take the snow, boil the snow to make drinking water. And in our communities that were dealing with high levels of air pollution and pollution on the land, and then the snow was on top of that, who are now taking in those toxins. Those are just a few examples of the dynamics. Now let's just fast forward to where we are today. Now, all these people who had their pipes burst, if you've ever had to replace or call a plumber into your house, you know how expensive that is. Imagine that you have to replace all of your pipes. And in our communities where people had lost jobs because of COVID or a number of other reasons, where's your money coming from to be able to do this? That's one part. You know, and there are these other dynamics that are going on where in Texas, you have these variable rates for some people for their heating costs and their electric costs. So normally some people might pay $75, $150 for their electricity for a month. Right. Now some people are getting bills of $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000. I want y'all just to take a second and ask yourself, if you got a $10,000 electric bill or heating bill, where are you gonna get the money from to pay that?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And we know that many of our homes, especially for folks who are living in lower wealth housing, you know, there are landlords that ain't never invested no money in weatherization or making sure that things are insulated properly. And a number of other dynamics that go on, or even if we own our own homes and we're just trying to keep food on the table and traditionally trying to keep the lights on, we got all these dynamics that are a part of this paradigm around environmental racism, environmental injustice, housing justice issues, And we won't even get into the fact that when the storms came, folks who had privilege were able to escape.
Yep.
They were able to leave the state, or they were able to go to a hotel that had a generator.
Yep.
And our folks were stuck. They're stuck in the cold. They were freezing. And now they're stuck because they're trying to rebuild their lives. And we know that in many instances, the cavalry does not come to save us. It might make its way down the road, but a lot of times they don't come and actually save our communities, because the system hasn't been designed for that in the way that we need it to be. And that's why we have to push the new Biden administration to fill whatever gaps might exist.
And that's facts, because at the end of the day, it's about, you have the power. And as a group, as a tribe, you can vote people in that you feel like fit your agenda, and you vote them in. But at the same time, you put pressure on them to make sure those agendas happen. Because if the one thing is, you can vote somebody in and think you're done, but you're not done. That's the easy part. The hard part is, putting a foot in their ass, say, hey, we voted you to do this and this and that. And you got to keep doing it.
Yeah. And we've got to, I'm so glad you brought up the civic process, because when I was at the Hip Hop Caucus for 2 years, I was blessed, to be there. And we worked with a number of artists around the Respect My Vote campaign, and really helping, brothers and sisters to understand the power that exists inside of their vote, and how it's not a one-time action, as you just raised, and how we really need to have a holistic strategy, right? From the local level to the county level to the state level, all the way to the federal level, of really understanding who these candidates are. I don't care. And sometimes I get in trouble for this, but I just give real talk. I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, or an independent. If you're not doing the right things for our communities, then you don't deserve our vote. I just don't give people my vote. I need to know, what's your track record? And also, what is your vision? And what are the commitments that you are willing to make? And then I'm gonna give you an opportunity. I'm gonna evaluate. I'm gonna give you an opportunity. And if you don't do the right thing, I'm gonna find somebody else. And here's the other thing that is so incredibly important, and I appreciate it for your platform here, folks. You have all the gifts and abilities that are necessary for any of these positions. I have worked with folks at the White House. I've advised White House. I've worked with senators and congressmen, all the way down the line to folks on local school boards. You have everything that it takes for any of those positions. You've just got to realize that it's all right for you to run for office. And it's all right for us to get behind our own and support them. We support you. We help you to get in there, and then we're going to hold you accountable too. So I just hope our folks, especially young folks, you ain't got to wait until you're 60 or 70 years old or 50 years old to run. There are some amazing young people who are now on Capitol Hill. And there, of course, are amazing folks, on the local and the county and the state level. Get it. Your voice matters. If we didn't learn anything from all of the energy and sacrifice that folks just did and continue to do through the Black Lives Matter movement, is that we can make change happen. It takes work. It hurts, but it is worth it. And a part of that movement is about people moving in to office, because it trust me, y'all, I done marched, I done protested, and that has its place and has its value. But you got to get in and you got to change to the best of your ability the system. And that means that you got to be in there holding those offices. And we got to get enough folks in so that you ain't the only one. And we've got to change. We've got a dynamic that is changing where you don't have to worry about being the only one. Now, you may be the only one in a corporate space, right? Like when we started this episode off, where you might be the only one at EPA or at NASA or wherever in a particular area there. But when it comes to running for office, you got folks who can help mentor you. You got folks who have paved the way in many instances, and there is a seat there for you, and it's waiting on you. The question is, why are you waiting to not run?
That's right. Instead of just waiting, just take it.
Take
the seat. Take the seat.
Right. Yeah, because people don't like to give away power.
No,
you got to go get it. You got to go get it.
You gotta go a little. You gotta go a little hood sometimes.
You gotta get gully sometimes. You know what I mean?
God bless it. So you gotta go Tebow.
You do. I mean, that's just real. And you know what? I've worked with so many folks. Some of the folks I most enjoy working with were the hustlers, right? And others who are doing things to survive and to get them to change the mindset. I often talk about moving from surviving to thriving, which is so incredibly important. So, if you've been a hustler, right? And we ain't going to talk about what you was hustling. There is a skill set if you're successful at that, right? You can translate those skills that you learned and things that probably were not helpful to the community into things that will be helpful in the community. If you know how to navigate, if you know how to talk to people, if you know how to leverage, right? All those different skill sets that you might learn. It's amazing when you see folks who will stand on the corner, it'd be 10 degrees below zero, and you trying to move what you're trying to move, and you're willing to stand out there for 8 hours or 10 hours or 12 hours to make a little bit of change. And then if you could take that energy, that dedication, and translate it into some positive things, you can do transformational things. And that's what I try and get folks to understand. It doesn't matter about where you came from, right? There is something inside of you that has greatness wrapped all around. It's tight. It's like somebody took a bunch of rubber bands and made this ball, and it wants to expand and it wants to explode. And you just have to be understanding and willing to allow that to happen. And then you surround yourself with other positive folks who either done walk that path or are walking that path. And y'all together can do some things. Look at all these powerful folks you got. You got Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She was working at a restaurant, and now she's one of the most powerful voices, in media and on Capitol Hill. You got Ilhan Omar, right? Came as an immigrant from another country, and people said because she was Muslim, that she wasn't able to do X, Y, and Z, and now she's knocking it out the park. You got Corey from Memphis, knocking it out. And, these are people who most folks would have seen and been like, well, yeah, they ain't the right ones. They didn't come from, certain families. They didn't go to certain schools.
That's right. Ain't
nothing wrong coming from a great family that maybe has a long history of doing good. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with being blessed with education, that happens from books inside of institutions. You have education lots of times from the streets. A lot of people got PhDs in the street that you can translate into the corporate world, into the political world, into the nonprofit world. Yep. And if we can just get folks to understand that any of these negative things that we see happening inside of our communities do not have to be our future. I often say, don't let the sins of the past be brought and become parts of the sins of the future. Because we can exercise that. For those of y'all who went to church and y'all done caught the Holy Ghost before or whatever it is, I need y'all to go get some holy water, whatever it is you need to do, and just sprinkle it. Sprinkle it on anything that is not positive in your life. Sometimes you got to sprinkle it on yourself, because sometimes we don't let a little negativity, get up in us. And we start to be like, well, I guess that's just the way it's supposed to be. No, it's not. I'm sorry, man. I know I'm taking you further than you wanted to go.
But I appreciate your time, your wisdom, just everything that is you, man. Like I said earlier, you remind me of a cool ass uncle. I want to call you Uncle Santiago Ali right now.
Well, my nieces and nephews, they call me Uncle Moo. So, I don't know if I want that trending on Twitter, but you know what I mean. But hey, it is what it is. If that's how they get down. If
the hat fits, wear it.
Well, I used to, because my locks and stuff used to be parted in the middle, so they used to call me Black Jesus. I was like, hold up, y'all, that's too much pressure. I'm not trying to be Black Jesus.
But King, I appreciate your time. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Let the people out there know how they can find you.
Yo, everybody, if you're on Twitter, you can catch me at EJ in Action. If you're on IG, it's real simple. It's my full name, Mustafa Santiago Ali. Or you can check out my website, www.mustafasantiagoali.com. Much love to everyone. We can make real change happen. We just got to go get it.
Cool. And we out. Peace.